Welcome to Clean Air Action's podcast, Cleaning Up Dirty. We talk politics with non-toxic people. I'm Liz Green-Schultz. I run a political nonprofit called Clean Air Action.
And I'm Sean Hoffman, Legislative Director of Clean Air Action. Clean Air Action is the proud sister organization of the Clean Air Council, the oldest environmental and public health organization in Pennsylvania.
Together, we fight for your constitutional right to breathe healthy air. Over here at Clean Air Action, we fight dirty with clean. That applies to anyone who messes with our political and civil rights, including corporations and politicians. So, another Liz and Sean episode for you. We, being Liz and Sean, were freaking out a little bit about the political headlines a few weeks back. We've calmed down enough to be able to talk about it on the air. But that's the inspiration for this WTF America episode.
Yeah, because, since
we were a little despondent.
A little bit, as I think a lot of folks were across the country. And, since VP Harris has gotten into the race, the vibes have changed dramatically, you might say.
Dramatically. Sean is a big hope scroller at this point.
It's become a problem, actually. Such hope scrolling happening all the time. But I think it's worth an analysis here, a look back, because I've had so many conversations with people, I think, Liz, you have too, about the United States of America, the greatest country that has ever existed in the history of mankind. How did we get to the point where we had multiple cycles in a row where we had historically unpopular nominees for both parties? And of course, you certainly have your diehard supporters of both, whether that's Hillary, whether that's Biden, whether that's Trump. But where you had a lot of Americans in the middle, if you will, in the very large middle saying, is this the best we've got? Are these the best candidates that we could possibly find from sea to shining sea to run for the most important job in the world? And I think a lot of people were despondent about that. And
I actually have a simple answer for how we got here. You ready?
I'm ready for it.
Because that's politics, baby.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, we'll get to my skepticism in a moment, but we haven't even gotten to the snacks yet. So we got some decent snacks.
They're pretty good.
I need to step my snack game back up.
This is, I think, an improvement over the last time where we were like scraping the bottom of the snack bag here. But
well, we got some cookie dough Rice Krispie treats, and
I'm not entirely sure what that entails.
Do you want to dive in right now, or do you want to save it? All right, go for it.
I'm gonna try a cookie dough Rice Krispie treat. I
could see it pairing well with the Ritz crackers, frankly.
I disagree. Respectfully, we have the Ritz crackers with nothing to put on them other than other snacks. A Liz classic.
A point of criticism against me in multiple podcast episodes, I believe. I love a good classic Ritz cracker. I don't know what to tell you.
With nothing on it.
Salty, buttery deliciousness.
It's just a blank palate.
I feel like you're unintentionally referencing Mitch Hedberg. I don't know if you remember Mitch Hedberg, the comedian who had the Ritz crackers. Yeah, or edible plates. And I just like to eat the plate, apparently.
He's a classic for a reason. All right, here we go. Oh, that's good.
Where's the cookie dough emanating from?
It's in there. I don't know that I would have guessed cookie dough.
All right, I got to give it a try.
It's a weird concoction. And it's been in the wrapper for a long time. Liz was saying that this is maybe expired, maybe not. And I was like, nah, it's fine. It's in the wrapper. It lasts forever.
God, you're throwing me right under the bus in front of the listeners.
This tastes like it's been in the wrapper for a long time. I'm just saying. I didn't know that was a thing that I would taste, but I believe that is what there's a hint of that.
I'll give you that. It's cookie dough Rice Krispie treat with a hint of PFAS.
It's finally aged in the wrapper. Otherwise, tasty.
And we have fudge mint delights and a little bit of leftover Oreos. So it's a real smorgasbord of decent treat options.
Decent's a good word. They will do.
Well, if you want to send questions for Sean and I to answer, maybe feedback on our snack and treat options.
Snack ideas also great.
Please send them via our socials at Clean Air Action. Candidly, no matter what the snack options are, I'm not really sure that eating my feelings is going to be enough for today. But given that we are at work, we want to keep things in the range of G-rated, PG-rated, PG-13. So we're going to stick to snacks.
We're all adults here.
Something like that. So how did we get here?
How'd we get here? Indeed. to me is a pretty clear line historically to where I think mass despondence, mass disappointment with the options available to us. You know, I think it's a result of history of the systems we have in place. I don't believe that that's because those systems are inherently flawed or broken. My take is politics are people. Government is run and driven by people, individuals. Maybe there's a lot of them, depending on which aspect of that we're talking about. But, you know, we get the government, we get based on the people we put in there. And I think it's very, very easy for a lot of us who aren't obsessive politic nerds like myself. It's easy for a lot of us to view these systems as monolithic, as faceless, as enormous systems of government at whatever level that just, they're machines that just work and crank out bad things that people don't like.
And it is kind of a goal of the podcast to illuminate these systems for people.
That's what we're here for, man. That's what we're doing.
Because something you like to say, nothing changes if nothing changes.
That's right.
And they are not faceless, nameless systems. They are driven by people.
It's people, even if it's hundreds, even if it's thousands of individual human beings that go in day after day to do these jobs and think, what decisions am I making? And so I think over the years, perhaps we as Americans have gotten too far away from that, of this idea that it is in fact people, that we need to pay attention and put a lot of emphasis and care on who it is we're choosing all up and down the ballot, because they all feed into each other. You know, people running at the local level, maybe they move up the ladder and run for state. Then maybe they move up the ladder and run for federal. It's all people, though.
And then maybe they're picking Supreme Court justices. Do we start with the Supreme Court justices and have us running screaming out the room?
I don't think we should start there. I think it helps us.
We'll build up. We'll build there.
We'll build up, right? And I think, well, why? Why do people start paying less attention to government and who's in there and the people? First of all, it's very complicated, and that's just a thing. You know, it takes a lot of time to understand all the minutiae and the complexities of this stuff. But I also think, you know, Americans didn't distrust government generally as much as they do now. It kind of starts, you know, with Vietnam. And
before we get to Vietnam, can I just say this is one of the areas that it's really useful for me that you're a secret boomer?
You're outing me. Yeah.
Well, listen, you threw me under the bus with the snacks.
I'm 35, but I have a lot of boomer tendencies. So
because I think it's pretty widespread in our generation to have this distrust of government. But you point out that this was not always the case, and that is useful perspective.
It's been passed on from generation to generation, and it's built this narrative. Coming out of World War II, there was a lot of patriotism, a lot of trust in our government to do big, bold, good, effective things. Not only did we defeat the Great Depression and turned a lot of people's lives around that way, built giant, the New Deal, giant foundational government programs that helped do that. We also won a world war.
We're going straight for the New Deal. I need a Ritz cracker.
You know, we did all these big, bold things. Again, won a world war in Europe and in Asia.
I love a plain Ritz cracker, man. I can't help it.
It's just, I don't get it. You know, it's fine. But where's your cheese, Liz? Where's your jelly? Where's your chocolate? Where's your something?
It disturbs the delicate flavor balance that is perfect. It's perfection in a cracker.
Do you eat like plain bread? Is that a thing? You just like take a loaf of bread and just break off plain old hunks and just eat it? Is that? I mean, again, not bad, but
I do not. I just I could eat a whole box of Ritz crackers, man. I'll try to interrupt you less because we have an important history lesson here that we need to get back to. I'm just really into these.
This
Ritz
is
crackers.
Also important.
Please
like,
continue.
America,
where were we?
Where do you stand on the
snacks? Did we get to Vietnam yet? Are we still on socialism? And
we're making our way there. So you get coming out of World War II. America is really, really patriotic believers in the power of government, particularly at the federal level, to do big, bold, effective things. Fast forward to Vietnam. In a lot of ways, it began this erosion of trust in our government because it was viewed as, with absolutely no disrespect to the veterans who served nobly in that conflict, we lost. And we had to leave with our tail between our legs, having not stopped the spread of communism, which was ultimately the goal. Although we were lied to, America was lied to about why we got into that war in the first place. The Gulf of Tonkin, supposedly the Vietnamese shot at us. That didn't happen. So that all shook out the way it did. And then Americans were like, whoa. This is our government lied to us to get us into this conflict. They got us nothing. And
the age that I am, when you mentioned the government lied, my mind flashed to other moments of us being lied to. But if I'm not mistaken, you're the history nerd here. Vietnam was approximately the first time your average person could suss that out, right? Could see the video contrasting with what we had been told. Absolutely.
I think that's a great point.
And then fast forward, Liz growing up in the middle of nowhere, I'm listening to Rage Against the Machine. So our generation came up a little differently.
But, the Vietnam War, that's a great point, was where a lot of that stuff started. You had the newscasts at night where you saw the carnage up close and personal in a way you never had before. And in World War II, what we saw were idealized propaganda films in the movie theaters about how our boys were so noble and fighting the good fight. And that was true, but it also didn't show us what we saw in Saving Private Ryan in the actual carnage that was involved with that. And you also bring up an interesting point about how culturally, Rage Against the Machine, that's like raging against the establishment. In the 60s, the late 60s, that's where you started hearing music, popular artists that were writing about the conflict.
Your favorite people.
My favorite people.
You boomer with your musical
CCR, man, like some of those Fortunate Son.
Creedence Clearwater, for those who don't know the CCR.
That's right, Creedence Clearwater Revival. Fortunate Son is about the Vietnam War. It's about that, that...
It ain't me.
Yeah, it was about like, I ain't no senator's son. I'm getting drafted and I'm heading over there. Again, in contrast to World War II, which was viewed as a noble conflict, one in which, the Japanese attacked us, so we got pulled into it, even though FDR was pretty sure we were going to get into it one way or another, and that we had to kind of save the world. But we got pulled into it, and we were fighting these objectively horrible, repressive regimes in the Nazis and the Imperial Japanese, whereas in Vietnam, it was like, you're forcing us, you're drafting us to go over and fight this war that, like, we're not even really sure why the hell we're fighting it. And the only way you could figure out how to get us into it was to lie and concoct something. And you had all these guys coming home, traumatized physically, emotionally, both by this terrible war. And people were like, what the hell? How did this happen? Federal government. That was LBJ, the last one-term president by choice. But that's why one of the reasons why he didn't run for re-election was because he was getting just destroyed by this terrible conflict that he brought us into. Really ruined his legacy.
And all of that radicalized a lot of my mentors.
Indeed.
The civil rights attorneys who have helped steer my career path were anti-war protesters in college at that time.
That absolutely sets the stage. You go to the 70s, which is just all over the place. You had Nixon, Watergate, and then
more lies,
and even Carter, who I've heard so many people who were alive during that era saying that he was too nice to be president. Too nice to be president, that he got kind of like walked over. And then you had the Iran hostage crisis that I don't know that it was Carter's fault that he didn't manage it right, but the hostages get released like the minute Reagan gets elected, and the 70s was just all over the place, right? Continues to erode this trust in government. I think Reagan maybe brings it back for a little bit, this sort of like rah-rah deference to the federal government. But then he had his own Iran-Contra scandal where he lied and his administration lied about that stuff. That's like decades of this building of a lack of faith and distrust in the federal government.
All right, I'm reaching for a fudge mint delight here because I feel like I'm in a history class, which is awesome because I'm just so grateful to have my colleague who knows all of this history and can lay it out this clearly and concisely.
You're a captive audience, so
I sure am.
I have somebody.
Bobby, help. Bobby, help me.
I think about these things all the time, and so I got to get them out. And this is my opportunity to do it.
Well, and it is important context to WTF, America. How did we get here?
How did we get here?
So, please, Please continue. I have my fudge mint delay.
Brings us to maybe my favorite decade, the 90s, where...
Well, you're in luck, because if you look at fashion on the street right now, the 90s are back.
It does my heart good. I hope it never changes.
Not me. I kind of refuse to dive into it.
You're missing out.
So we get to the 90s. There was just like a small issue in the White House in the 90s.
Back in the good old days, old Bill Clinton, Bubba, makes it to the White House. And again, one of the greatest retail politicians of all time who, had some controversy in the White House. But what's interesting and most valuable for this conversation was his opposition in Congress, Republicans led by then Speaker Newt Gingrich, who injected a level of venom into politics. Politics has always been rough and tumble. It probably always will be. But prior to that, personal attacks in many respects had been considered off limits. We're like, well, we're just here talking politics, policies. We don't need to get so much into the mudslinging. And then, they took it so far as to try and impeach Clinton. First guy to get impeached in office since
they didn't just try,
Andrew Johnson.
They succeeded.
But they didn't find him guilty. No president's ever been found guilty. They've been charged with impeachment, Trump twice now, but they didn't find him guilty, so he stayed in office. But injected this us versus them, zero-sum game kind of vibe into politics that I remember my mom at the time, prior to this sort of Clinton-Gingrich conflict, she'd been a Republican for most of her life and actually felt bad for Clinton. Like the Republicans were just hammering him. I was, in elementary school at the time, so I don't really remember her feelings on it at the time. But she said, it kind of drove her to Democrats in the 90s because of how savagely she felt the R's were going after Clinton.
That's really interesting.
And really trying everything they could to impeach him.
And so began the tide turning in Bucks County.
Funnily enough, the tide, it's still pretty 50-50 there in old Bucks. But so you get this level of venom, right? And you layer that on top of some decades of building distrust in government. And then you have the Bush years where we saw 9/11, of course. And then you saw the bubble bursting on the economy towards the back end of the Bush years. By the time of that era, Bush is super unpopular. There'd been a lot of distrust on the part of Vice President Dick Cheney. You had the whole Iraq War, Afghanistan, a lot of stuff where people are like, here we go again. Even more reasons to distrust the federal government.
That was about where my distrust began.
Right. Circa 2004. Kerry doesn't win. Liz loses all faith.
Devastated. I
in
lost
the federal
all
government. That was it. That was it, man. Of all elections, Kerry's cool, man, but he wasn't exactly like Obama-esque, He wasn't.
He was to me. I loved Kerry.
I
thought he was the next JFK.
What was it? His hair? He's got a good head of hair. He's tall, from New England.
I don't even know.
Was it the windsurfing? That was Liz loves windsurfing. Yes.
I don't know. It was just vibes, I guess. There was something I felt. I trusted him, and I didn't trust Bush. So that was the first campaign that I worked on, and I was really jazzed about Kerry and really devastated when he lost. So then it was all out the window for me. No more trust in politics anymore.
But, interestingly enough,
kind of, but Sean criticizes me deeply for my skepticism.
Deeply. As an eternal political optimist. I know we talked about this on a previous episode. This concept of who would you rather get a beer with? Within this John Kerry, George Bush context, I think it's interesting that you, Liz, you sort of gravitate, you liked Kerry more. You liked Kerry's vibe more, but more Americans said they wanted to have a beer with Bush than with Kerry. And I like Kerry. I think he's a great guy. Done a lot of really tremendous stuff on climate. He's been an amazing climate advocate. Really, ever since.
Stellar windsurfer.
Top tier, no question. But man, I think it would probably be more fun to get a beer with W. Honestly. I mean, that guy, some of the stuff he says.
You could get a nice gimlet with John Kerry. Maybe a martini.
Like a cocktail, a Vespa. But you listen to some, particularly in his post-presidency, George W. Bush, you're like, that guy's kind of funny. He's kind of I could throw it down with W. He's probably got some good stories. I don't know what his preference in beer is, but in any event, we get through the Bush era, whether you want to have a beer with him or not. By the time you get to the end of his presidency, a lot of people were super, super fed up, disillusioned. Enter Barack Hussein Obama.
Picture of hope.
'08, hope and change, baby. Like big time.
That hopey changey stuff.
For the first time in a long time. Now, that doesn't mean that the distrust in the government's gone. Certainly not. And people still feeling some hard feelings about prior eras and such appropriately. We get Obama in there. We saw a surge of support for Obama, the likes of which, hadn't been seen in generations.
Right. And my people felt like, all right, we're good now.
And by your people, you mean the skeptics? The people are like, this is broken forever. Forever and always.
I guess I meant progressives, but sure, skeptics. Yeah, I had a break in my skepticism.
For a couple of years.
I came out of my undergraduate skepticism into my belief in American ideals once more. And then that changed pretty abruptly.
And this is exactly where we're going with this conversation. And this is the reason, exactly what you just articulated, for why I think we got to such a despondent place as Americans. So Obama gets in, hope and change. Everyone is so stoked for what that means for the country. Certainly not every single person voted for Barack Obama, but there was a coalition of people who supported him that was big and broad and jazzed.
And I think felt pretty unanimous, at least in my circles.
Yeah.
Because the people who didn't feel that way were not especially empowered to speak out at that time.
Sure.
So there was a silent anti-group. So I thought we were going to coast right from Obama into Hillary into a string of Democratic presidents who would just fix all the things. That was sort of my mindset at the time.
Sure. And I think that was a lot of people's mindset at the time, that this true hope and will actually result in change that we can feel in our systems.
And make us proud to be an American and feel pride on a national stage, which is not how I felt when GWB was in office.
Certainly. While ushering in a new era, first African-American president, tremendous orator, super, super excited about it. So many people were feeling that. By the time you get to 2010, 2 years into his first term, I think a lot of that hope and change feeling was starting to evaporate because Obama burned a lot of political capital passing Obamacare. And Republicans were absolutely determined. That famous quote from Mitch McConnell on the Senate floor saying, we're going to do everything we can to make Barack Obama a one-term president. That combined with demonizing Obamacare as the worst, most horrific piece of legislation that could have been passed, which is just absurd. But, you saw 2 years later, 2010, Obama came in with big majorities in Congress. And then that tide went right on out. How did he describe it? As a shellacking, a thumping? Some word to describe the absolute beatdown that Democrats experienced in 2010.
And you know what's interesting? I was not sufficiently engaged in politics at that time to understand the impact of that. It wasn't until much later when I went to law school and started to tune in to these things.
It was the rise of the Tea Party, which, if you ask me, is like MAGA light. That was sort of when that started. Tea Party Patriots was such a force.
It was like the prequel.
It really was. And it was a whole new force in politics. So not only does that burst the hope and change bubble real fast, I think it also reinforced this idea that, change isn't coming. That, in fact, here we are right back where we were in 2007 or in the 90s, where, like cats and dogs, Republicans and Democrats in Washington are just fighting tooth and nail every inch of the way. A win for the other side is a loss for us. Zero-sum game politics. Less concerned with what's best for the country and more concerned with how do we deprive the other side of a win so that we look better. Now, that's a big, broad generalization.
You sound like me.
It's a thing that happened all too often and continues to happen. So you get through Obama's term, and Hillary Clinton is essentially Democrats' preordained candidate. She was extremely qualified for the position, but had also been in politics for a really long time and had been in the trenches of that zero-sum game, Republicans versus Democrats stuff for a long time.
Had even been in the White House.
Been in the White House, been in the Senate.
And I'll tell you, I had very little doubt that she was going to win. I wasn't particularly enthusiastic about her as a candidate, other than like, yay, Hillary. But I had very little doubt she was going to win.
And that was true of a lot of people. A lot of people in the nation, including, I think, Donald Trump. Up to election night, when that election was called, I believe that Donald Trump also believed he was not going to win. And
we still just thought that he was, trying to sell books, like doing it for publicity.
Yeah, I think that was in a large part his aim, but obviously it turned out differently. But why? Why did it turn out differently? Because we had reached a point where Americans were so frustrated with the status quo at large, and Hillary, for better or for worse, personified that status quo. And by frustrated, I mean a broad sense for millions and millions and millions of Americans who felt like, regardless of who we elected, that they did not feel a measurable improvement in their day-to-day lives, whether that was financially, whether that was just in terms of pride and patriotism and feeling good about the state of the nation and the state of the world. And
even the way she spoke about them, the basket of deplorables, which she backed off from, but the ship had already sailed.
Sure. And so you had that on Hillary's side, a lot of people not feeling enthused about her. And then enter Trump, who, not only was it a shock that he defeated Hillary, it was a shock that he cleared what was a very large field of Republican contenders during the 2016 primary. And I think the reason he cleared the field is the same reason why he ended up winning, was that there are a lot of people in this country who felt that the system wasn't worth saving. And by the system, I mean the way in which we elect our leaders and the government,
the
swamp, if you will, a term I think mostly coined by Trump. They were so frustrated. Beyond repair. So frustrated with it, so they say, okay, well, so we got a candidate who has no idea what he's doing and is probably going to blow the whole thing up. Well, then let's do it. Light the fuse is what many of them thought. He's probably not going to win anyway, so who cares? Light the fuse. And turns out that's what happened.
Dun, dun,
dun. Then people were like, oh man, Trump, he's wild and crazy. So we went to Biden, who I think the only reason why Biden got elected was because he's running against Trump. A lot of people are like, oh, well, what if Biden won't run in 2016? Like then it would, yeah, but there's no freaking way Biden would have beaten Hillary in a primary. Absolutely no way. He would have got smoked. He was considered perfect in 2020 because he was sort of like the do no harm candidate. He was the agent to help America break the Trump fever. But then once we took that medicine, then it was like, all right.
We weren't sure, right? We weren't sure the medicine was going to work.
That's the thing. It's not because they were like, everyone was so stoked about the medicine. It's just like, well, we got to return normalcy in some fashion.
Some form of normalcy, please. Like a Ritz cracker. I need to...
Like a Ritz,
infuse
Biden was like a plain buttery Ritz cracker. We just got to cleanse his palate. We tried something really weird, like with Trump. And now we just got to cleanse. But then people were like, oh, I don't want another plain buttery Ritz cracker, though. Like, maybe we want a different cracker altogether. Like what? And that's why people were like, and even aside from the age-related concerns that I think a lot of people had with Biden was also the fact that, again, to a large extent, he represented a continuance of the status quo. And a lot of people were like, we purged the fever that in and of itself was the Trump fever, was in response to an illness, a sickness in the system. The fact that he got through in the first place. But then
this was part of my concerns about Biden.
Sure. You're one of those skeptical folks who for a long time, since approximately 2004, who's been very skeptical of the system, that perhaps it is in fact broken beyond repair. Is that a fair characterization of your views?
I don't think so, but let's suss this out. So it's funny because I never thought of myself as a skeptic. In fact, we consider ourselves optimists, reckless optimists.
Until you started working with me, then you're like, oh man, this guy's really crazy. This guy.
I was like, well, I don't have that level of optimism. Damn. No, I think of myself as an optimist. So it's always been funny to me that you think of me as a skeptic. So we can just unpack this on air here.
Let's do it. Our listeners want to know, where do you stand?
I certainly don't think the system is broken beyond repair. It's a system. Mm-hmm. So we can't get away from that it's going to be both over and under inclusive by nature, because that's how systems work.
Well, why? I'm not sure I agree with that premise.
Fascinating.
That inherently that you make a system and it's going to be inherently biased towards one side or another, like just all of them, no matter what.
I didn't say biased. You're putting words in my mouth here.
Well, just say what you mean, man. What are you getting at?
Well,
are systems inherently broken all the time, or aren't they?
For the love of God. So there certainly is bias built into systems, but that is not what I said or meant in that moment.
Oh, fair enough.
Well, systems are designed to balance efficiency and goodness. You know, everything would grind to a halt if you just slowed down and customized the system perfectly to each person.
That makes sense.
So that's why
you got to balance between the two. You got to get stuff done, but ideally in the most equitable, fair, just way you possibly can.
While you have people creating that system who aren't necessarily as passionate about their work as you are.
Or passionate about fairness, justice, equality, those sorts of things.
That part. Also that part. So I think if we had a bunch of, I would say Liz's and Sean's, but let's just say Sean's and like a younger, less tired version of Liz running around. We need
Liz's too. We need Liz to keep the Sean's grounded.
If we were running things, the systems might look differently, but we are not. So that is partly why I say the system is both over and under inclusive. Now, you mentioned bias. Absolutely, systems have bias built in because systems are designed by people. And people have bias built in.
Sure do.
And only over the last few years did we start to have national dialogue about bias and unconscious bias and bringing it to the surface and working on it and releasing it and having conversations about it so that it's not just buried and built into systems. Yeah. And that's still pretty controversial because if you reveal a bias, you can get canceled, fired, whatever.
Sure. So
we talk about wanting to have grace with politicians who grow when they're exposed to new information. And I think the same is true for people, that it's very important that we slow down from reactionary politics and reactionary responses to people when they stumble with bias. I have a very long history and training in this that hasn't come up on the podcast yet, but I've led seminars about this. So I do feel that way, but I think we're supposed to be talking about my skepticism.
I was just going to say, how does this bias in systems result in your skepticism? Or is that how you get to that point? Getting to the good stuff here.
No,
you're digging deep, man.
We weren't supposed to talk about this today. He sprang this on me intentionally on the podcast so that I would have to answer
This
him.
was not my plan at all. You kind of backed yourself into it. It's good to think about it.
I haven't thought about this in a minute, so I'm trying to figure out how to articulate it. But I think the skepticism starts to set in for me because everything that you described, this walk through American history over the last 100 years or so, I'm not that old, but I'm old enough now to have seen certain trends and see certain predictability from people. And that combined with my passion for justice makes it hard to believe that there are people who are actually going to commit to the change that we need, because I haven't seen a lot of that. I think it's pretty rare for someone to be, one, committed to trying to create change, and two, able to, and three, to then actually see that through. I hate to say, I think it's so rare that it's hard to believe in that. And that's one of the reasons why this time period feels so different to me and is really cool to be living in.
And by this time period, you mean like the last month?
Yeah,
or so,
I do. Yeah, I really do. Like right now, this Kamala hope bump, because as we talked about in the Kamala episode, I was not super pro Kamala 5 years ago, but I, at the risk of sounding naive, which is its own skeptical comment to make, I believe in her and she helps me to believe in this country again. And
that's really interesting.
It is, because it's really unexpected for me, because I didn't know, and as I mentioned in a prior episode, there's like a part of my soul that I thought was too broken for that. And I didn't know that until it changed from Biden to Kamala. And then I felt something. I felt a fire and a spark again that I haven't felt in a while.
That's really interesting. And I think a lot of other people are feeling the same energy right now. But so your issue is not so much with the systems, it's with human nature. And like we were saying earlier, I was going to say,
I kind of skated over that part. So
your issue is with humanity at large. But
I thought about saying more about that, and I didn't want to get too depressing on the podcast.
But it's interesting though. This feeds back to that point I was making earlier, right? That our systems and our government and our politics, it's people, it's individuals. And if you fundamentally believe that really good people who really want to do good things consistently for the entirety of their career or lives are vanishingly rare, then how could you possibly think that government at any level can consistently function well?
Exactly.
That's fascinating. And I think...
And terrifying, right?
But I think it perfectly encapsulates what a lot of Americans feel and have felt for a long time now, even if they weren't perhaps able to articulate it, that we've seen too many bad folks come and go, or folks that appeared promising on the front end, and then by the time they got to the back end weren't so promising, that it's difficult to maintain any level of optimism.
And hope. Yeah. And to further the complexity here, I don't believe in bad people. This is something that I would...
Goodness.
No, and I don't think this has come up. I don't think you've heard this from me yet.
I don't know that I have.
I would argue with my students about this in my classroom. Anytime it came up and a student called somebody bad, I would push back on that because I think people are complicated, but I think actually have very clear motivations when you really study people. And I think people are often afraid, and it can take more courage than we like to admit to just live your life every day and to keep going. But when you break that down, to me, I don't think people are bad. And obviously, this has resulted in countless arguments because tons of people disagree with me on this, and that's totally fine. I accept that. I welcome that. But, I was a public defender. I was raised Christian. So I have those ideals in me, and they inform my apparently overly complex beliefs in this area that I didn't realize were all that complex. But this is the part I skated over before, that I think it's easy as you acclimate to adulthood to lose hope and that spark. And I think that we can't do that. We have to hold on to that if we're going to keep steering this country in the direction that we all truly want it to go.
Agreed. Maybe we come to it from different perspectives, but I absolutely share that belief that I don't think people are bad. I've said to you before and others that I don't think there's too many people out there who wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to be an asshole today. Like, I'm going to go out there and just be a bad person. Like, no, even if that is ultimately what ends up happening, I don't think there's too many people who set that goal for themselves. I think the vast majority of humanity aspires to be good, decent people. It's just our views of sort of what that looks like or how we get there that are so drastically different at times, or our perspectives are so different as to how you get to what does it mean to be a good person.
Perspectives, but also how people are constrained to act, partly by the systems. Because, for all our talk in this country about free will and individualism and bootstrapping, we're all interdependent and we are constrained by the systems and supported by the systems, but we rely on them. So it makes it so that we're not all just waltzing through the world doing whatever we want. And because we perceive these boxes, we start to feel trapped by them in some ways. And can I just say, this was not the plan for this podcast episode at all. So I hope any of this is making any level of sense. But
I'm digging it. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, I think it's important stuff to talk about. And it's honestly a little nerve-wracking to record it and run it on the internet. But this is actually exactly what brought me to law school. To me, this is a civil rights conversation without talking about civil rights at all. But that this is supposed to be a country where we can all self-actualize, where we can maximize who we want to be and what we want to do. And that's actually not available to everyone. And in fact, I think not available to many.
Yeah.
But Joanne Epps just flashed into my mind. She was the president of Temple University at the time of her passing recently. She was one of my professors at Temple Law. And she, in my first semester of law school, she had a patriotism I did not yet understand because I did not yet have it. And I did by the time I graduated Temple Law, because as I learned more about our government and how unique it is, and that this is a country where we can continually work toward better in really meaningful ways that can't be done everywhere, that sparked patriotism in me that I never, ever expected. And it's why I'm a patriotic Democrat. And we talk about the rarity of truly patriotic Democrats. I have my little hat with a flag on it, and I have all kinds of patriotic shirts. And I feel like a weirdo in that respect because I don't really know many other Democrats that have that approach other than Yankee Doodle over here.
I think most Democrats are patriotic. I just think that the whole rah-rah flag stuff for some reason got commandeered by Republicans, and that's a whole conversation for another time. But I think maybe just less comfort perhaps with wearing that flag on their sleeves. But you said something before, Liz, that was really interesting that I think feeds back to this whole pessimism towards politics and government in America generally, which is that we're kind of constrained by the systems we're in, right? And so when you have a system like our political system that is a zero-sum game where both sides are just fighting for victory and to prevent the other side from victory at any costs, whatever that looks like.
And being performative.
And that starts to generate certain kinds of candidates. You take Hillary Clinton, for example. By the time you get through a couple of decades worth of internecine fighting in the political trenches, there's a lot of things that
I've never heard that word before, and I'm sitting trying to think of what it means.
Don't worry about it.
I'm sorry, you were probably in such a moment and was like, what's internecine?
Google it. Word of the day, internecine. Where, you get these politicians doing these things that are perceived negatively. From the political side, it's that's just what we have to do to win. You want to win, this is what we got to do. We got to do some things that are negative. We got to shoot down some good ideas that the other side has just so they don't win, even though they're good ideas. And every American would like it. And you do that for enough cycles, for enough years, for enough decades, and people start to think, man, this thing is so messed up because the good people get squashed. Remember, we go back to Jimmy Carter, the guy, he was too good. He was too good to be president. And that's why he got swallowed up in 4 years. That's how you get that skepticism. Oh, yeah, we got Obama in there. And yeah, 2 years in, he got the Republicans, had them all tied up in knots and he couldn't get anything done anymore. And so much for the hope and change. Now, fast forward to today and we'll see how this shakes out, obviously, right? There's still an election to be had in November. And then whoever wins, there's 4 years of governance to come after that. Time will tell how that shakes out. But perhaps... and I'm hoping that we're at a real interval of change here, generationally speaking, where to your point, Liz, you're feeling fired up about the prospect that perhaps we're getting to a point where the system, thanks to hopefully putting good people in who want to do good things, who have learned the lessons from the last few decades of political warfare that have resulted in a despondent, pessimistic American public. Perhaps now they're saying, hey, we can win and get things done, but we got to do that while being good people, while doing things that speak to the American public that don't result in cycle after cycle of pessimism.
And not just while being good people, but also while being authentic people.
Right. Which I think goes hand in hand, honestly.
I think they do go hand in hand, but I think in the past we thought of them as being opposites. And we expected, as we've talked about, we expected the lack of authenticity from politicians, which then, of course, makes them harder to believe.
Right.
And it's worth mentioning, if you know anybody who's worked in government, everybody knows somebody who has a crazy story that casts doubt on our government systems. When that's people's contact with government, it's easy to throw out the baby with the bathwater and say, it's all bad, it's beyond repair, it's not worth fighting for. And I think it is worth fighting for. So doesn't that make me an optimist and not a skeptic? But also, I'm currently wearing a shirt that is blue with white stars and has the word resist in red. So I guess we're all complicated. But to me, that is patriotism. Acts of resistance against the unjust portions of government, I think, are the highest form of patriotism.
Right. It's very American.
Like within bounds, by voting, by by calling for accountability for elected officials, not by storming the Capitol.
Right. So there is sort of an underlying belief on your part that if we get the right people in the system, maybe we don't have to blow the whole thing up. Right?
I just think it's really rare to get the right people for a bunch of reasons.
Well, maybe that's changing, though. Maybe now we've reached a point in our history as not just as Americans, maybe just as humans, where, and I think it is very ironic that a lot of this authenticity stuff came in the wake of Trump.
Sure did.
You had Hillary Clinton, who was in many ways considered highly inauthentic, as I've often said, wooden on the stump, because she was so focused on saying the right thing as far as conventional political wisdom went. And then you had Trump, could not have been more the opposite. And whether you like him or you don't, he is heavily authentic in his own way. And so I think it's fair to say that he is ushered in, love him or hate him, he sort of blew the doors off of the old political wisdom of you have to perform in a certain way, in a certain style. You can only say certain things you can't say. Otherwise, your political career is going to be over with. And now we're seeing such a hunger for authenticity, particularly on the part of younger voters. And that might be the thing that saves us. Funnily enough, the Trump fever might result in a stronger America and a stronger political system by saying that we need you to be authentic. It's not enough to just say the right things. You got to be authentic and you got to be good at your job and hopefully a good person.
Absolutely. And that's how America is supposed to be designed, right? That's how America originated, by rebelling against the king and saying, no, not that. We're going to do this instead. We're going to do this thing called people power. And we're seeing, I think, a bit of a reclamation there. And I hope that continues, because I think it's a hard energy to maintain, but I think we need to maintain it in order to make real progress in this country.
Agreed. It's taken us a couple of centuries to get there. Started in the 1700s, and it took us a long time to get close to this point. And obviously, again, time will tell, right? We still got an election to get through and a whole lot more beyond that, but definitely hopeful right now.
I'm feeling little sparks of hope.
Little sparks of hope. We'll take it. We'll take that. I hope for folks who are listening, you're feeling some sparks of hope too, because we sure are. Before we wrap up, I think we need to talk walk-up songs. I know we've talked about mine. We've asked a lot of guests on here, what's your walk-up song? But I don't think we've discussed Liz's walk-up song. Is that right, Liz? Have we not talked about that yet on the show?
Yeah, I think that's right. You really got me in the hot seat today. You're asking me a series of questions that...
Liz is the guest of today's show, actually. We're just interviewing her, asking her all the tough questions, and including...
To Liz's surprise.
It's the bottom of the ninth.
Oh, no.
2 outs. You're coming up to the plate. What song are you playing? Get you pumped up. Hit that home run.
It's It's a tough question.
Many answers, many good answers.
There are two that come to mind. So I think I'm going to cheat and say both. Well, let's say the backup answer I think would be Fuck It, I'm a Flower by Crying Daycare Choir.
Oh, that's I don't know if I'm familiar with Crying Daycare Choir.
Yes, you'll have to
give
it a listen on your way home. But both of these songs are, in fact, my jams these days. And I think also kind of encapsulate America and where we're at right now. So some of the lyrics...
I'm not surprised. That's very on brand for Liz.
On brand. So some of the lyrics there are, fuck it, I'm a flower, growing taller every day, getting greener by the hour, and I don't care what people say.
I can beat that. That's
right?
pretty good.
But that's my backup answer.
That's not even the...
So the other
that's the
one...
runner. That's the honorable mention.
That's the honorable mention. And then the one I think I'm going to go with is Freedom, specifically by Brass Against, a band. I mentioned Rage Against the Machine earlier.
You did.
Brass Against does covers and mashups of Rage Against the Machine and other bands. And the song Freedom is, I believe it's a mash. I should know this. I believe it's a mashup of a Rage song and a Beyonce song. But it's, I can't even.
I can beat that. That's pretty, that'll get anybody pumped up.
Like you just got to listen to it. I don't want to spoil it for you and sing it. So
those are some like deep choices. I don't think you're going to hear that combo from too many others, but they're really good.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe assumption.
From Brass Against, it's not even just not Beyonce, not Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, but I think that they're good vibes for our country right now, and both like history of the country and present.
Awesome. Give them a listen, folks. There's some good ones. They'll get you pumped.
And on that note, to our listeners, thank you for listening to Cleaning Up Dirty. To help us clean up dirty, follow us at Clean Air Action everywhere on social media and subscribe to Cleaning Up Dirty wherever you stream podcasts.